Imagine a wedding. White dress, champagne, vows under an arch of flowers. Now, forget all of that, because in the medieval world, weddings weren't romantic. They were power plays. They were business deals. They were, at times, bizarre, chaotic, and deeply sacred events rolled into one. No wedding planner, no wedding cake, and definitely no slow dances under fairy lights. In this video, we're tearing back the curtain on what really happened at a medieval wedding ceremony. Not the fairy tale, but the real, raw, gritty story, where love, land, politics, and family honor collided. Before the vows, before the feast, came the deal. In most medieval societies, a marriage was first and foremost an alliance, especially for nobility. Families didn't just marry off their children for love. They married to secure land, military power, titles, or peace between rival families. And it started with the betrothal. Now, this wasn't a cute proposal. This was a binding legal contract, sometimes made when the couple was still in diapers. Yes, children could be betrothed as early as 5 or 6. The bride and groom often had no say. The contract spelled out dowry terms, inheritance rights, and what would happen if one of them died before the wedding. A priest or notary was present, witnesses signed, and if they sealed it with a symbolic act like hand-holding or a kiss, it could be as legally binding as a marriage. So, before love ever entered the picture, the game of power had already begun. Let's talk about the dowry. In medieval times, a bride came with a price tag. Her family was expected to provide land, gold, livestock, or goods to help the new couple start their life, or more often, to sweeten the deal for the groom's family. But here's the twist. While the bride brought a dowry, the groom's family often paid a bride price or mourning gift in return. These exchanges were highly negotiated. If you thought haggling was just for the market, you haven't seen two lords debating the value of a cousin with a limp and 20 acres. Sometimes the bride never saw a coin of it. In noble marriages, the entire thing was orchestrated by parents, guardians, or even kings. The bride was often the least powerful person in the room, yet her body and name were the currency. Now onto the bride's big day. But again, forget the white dress. In medieval Europe, white didn't symbolize purity. Red, blue, or green were more common, often dyed with expensive materials if the family had wealth. Brides wore their best outfit, not a special one made just for the ceremony, and the real display was in the embroidery. Family symbols, religious motifs, and even protective charms were sewn right into the fabric. But here's the fun part: the hair. A maiden's loose hair symbolized virginity. So, on her wedding day, her hair was often worn long and uncovered, sometimes with a delicate circlet or a garland of herbs like rosemary and rue to ward off evil. And let's not forget the scent. Fragrance was everything. Perfumed oils, herbal sachets, or flowers were used to mask body odor and show off status. Getting ready wasn't just cosmetic. It was symbolic. The bride wasn't dressing up for romance. She was being presented as a vessel of fertility, honor, and property. So where did this glorious union happen? A candlelit chapel? A scenic garden? Nope. In many medieval towns, weddings were held at the church door, in full view of the public. Why? Because marriage was a public matter. It needed to be seen, witnessed, recorded. In fact, the priest often stood on the steps, blessing the union with the church literally behind him and the village watching. The ceremony was short but serious. The couple would join hands, say their vows in Latin or the local tongue, and the priest would bless the union. Rings were optional. Not every bride got one. If she did, it might be iron or silver, not gold. After the vows, the couple might step inside the church for a mass. But the main event was done outside, in daylight, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and possibly even enemies. Now for the weirdest part. After the ceremony, it was time for the bedding, a public, often chaotic ritual where the couple was escorted to their marriage bed. Yes, people watched. Not the whole act, of course, but in some regions, witnesses stood nearby, heard the couple's first words, or even stayed long enough to see the groom throw his stockings or shirt out the door as proof. In noble families, a scribe might be present to officially record the consummation. Why? Because if there was ever a dispute about legitimacy, land rights, or annulment, that document could settle everything. The pressure was real, and the wedding night wasn't private bliss. It was a public performance of duty. Now, finally, the celebration. A medieval wedding feast was the true centerpiece. Depending on wealth, it might last a day or stretch over several. Tables groaned under roasted meats, stews, bread, pies, mead, and wine. In some places, the food was symbolic, like spiced cakes for fertility or pomegranate wine for passion. Entertainment came in many forms: music, jesters, dancing, or even staged jousts and bear fights for the highborn. But the feast wasn't just a party. It was another public show of wealth and alliances. Who was seated next to whom? Who gave gifts? What songs were sung? Every detail was a message about the family's power and prestige. Marriage wasn't always a church affair. Until the 12th century, a wedding could be legal with just a verbal vow. No priest, no church, just consent and witnesses. But as the Catholic Church gained power, it claimed ownership of marriage. By the late medieval period, a marriage needed a priest, and preferably a church blessing, to be valid. The church enforced rules: no weddings during Lent, no close blood relations, no secret unions. It also pushed for monogamy, faithfulness, and the idea that marriage was a sacrament, not just a contract. So the church didn't just bless marriages, it reshaped them. Now you might be asking, where was the love? Here's the twist. While most marriages were arranged, love did happen, but often after the vows. There's evidence of couples growing fond of each other over time, exchanging gifts, writing letters, and even mourning deeply when the other died. Courtly love, the idea of romantic longing, existed, but it was usually outside of marriage. Songs, poems, and stories spoke of unattainable love, a knight yearning for a noblewoman, a wife longing for her true match. But marriage? That was duty. So while the wedding ceremony was formal and transactional, love found its own way in, sometimes quietly, sometimes in rebellion. Not all weddings looked the same. While nobles held lavish ceremonies and diplomatic feasts, peasants had simpler affairs. A couple might marry in the village square or at the church step, followed by a small meal, a song, and maybe a mug of ale. But don't underestimate them. These weddings were filled with just as much meaning. The whole village might attend. Friends would bless the couple with handmade gifts, and traditions like jumping the broom, dancing in circles, or tying hands with ribbon added intimacy and charm. For peasants, a wedding wasn't about land or lineage. It was about starting a new household, a fresh life together in front of the community. Let's end with some of the weirdest, wildest customs. Brides carried garlic or rosemary to keep away evil spirits. Some believed it was bad luck for the bride to wear green, a color associated with fairies. Guests threw wheat grains, not rice, to bless the couple with fertility. In parts of Scotland, there was a practice called blackening the bride, covering her in soot, feathers, or food as a pre-wedding prank. In Eastern Europe, the groom had to kidnap his bride or buy her back with ale and songs. Every region had its quirks, but they all shared the same idea. A wedding wasn't just about the couple, it was a communal transformation with drama, laughter, tears, and a touch of chaos. A medieval wedding was not a private affair. It was theater, it was law, it was ritual, and it was public spectacle. Behind the layers of ceremony, strange customs, and sacred vows was a deep truth. Weddings shaped not just two lives, but entire communities. We may live in a different world now, but maybe we haven't strayed so far. We still use weddings to send messages, to make statements, to show unity, to celebrate. And somewhere in all the medieval madness, there was still space for hope, joy, and sometimes even love. What surprised you most about medieval weddings? The contract? The feasting? The public bedding? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more real stories from the medieval world without the fairy tale filter, make sure to like, subscribe, and join us for the next deep dive into the past.